The elevator door slid open, revealing Dr. Sarah Mitchell as she stepped into the marble-lined lobby of Liberty First Bank. Today felt different. The security guards avoided her gaze, and whispers filled the air. Sarah carried herself with dignity, her tailored navy blazer exuding authority. In her leather portfolio, she held more than just documents. She bore the weight of every slight and every moment she had faced due to her race. As she approached the executive elevator, the nameplate caught her eye. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Chief Executive Officer. But today, that title felt fragile. The ride to the 32nd floor gave her 90 seconds to prepare for a boardroom full of men who had already decided her fate. The elevator opened into the executive suite, where conversations halted abruptly. "You don't belong in our boardroom," Chairman Edward Black said, his words cutting through the silence like a knife. Sarah smiled slightly, knowing something they didn't. She was prepared for this moment. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice steady, "shall we begin?" CFO Marcus Taylor dismissed her presence, implied her time was less valuable than theirs. Sarah presented impressive quarterly results, but Black and the others questioned her leadership style and cultural fit, using coded language that hinted at their biases. "I'm curious about these values," she asked, challenging them to elaborate. The tension in the room thickened as Taylor slid a manila folder of anonymous complaints toward her. "We received concerns about your leadership approach." Sarah scanned the complaints, which read like a greatest hits of workplace discrimination disguised as performance issues. "These are interesting," she said calmly. "Could you provide specific examples so I can understand how to improve?" The conversation escalated, revealing their discomfort with her diversity initiatives. "You mean the initiative that increased our talent pool by 40% and brought in candidates from top universities?" she countered. Black waved her off, insisting it was about cultural fit. As the meeting progressed, Sarah realized the stakes were higher than she had anticipated. "We've decided to terminate your employment, effective immediately," Black announced, offering a severance package contingent on her signing a non-disclosure agreement. Sarah opened the folder but didn't read it. "The circumstances," she repeated, tasting the euphemism. "Could you elaborate on what justifies terminating a CEO who has delivered record profits and customer satisfaction?" The board members squirmed under her scrutiny. "It's not about numbers," Parker said, revealing their true concerns about maintaining control and the status quo. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message. It's time. She had been documenting everything, and the tide was about to turn. As security guards arrived to escort her out, she stood her ground. "I need to complete the regulatory documentation before I leave. Federal banking regulations require it." Moments later, Sarah Chun, a civil rights attorney, entered with associates carrying briefcases. "I'm here representing Dr. Mitchell in what appears to be a discriminatory termination proceeding," she announced, revealing that Sarah was the largest individual shareholder of the bank. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "Dr. Mitchell isn't just a CEO. She controls 35% of the bank's equity," Sarah Chun stated. The board members were stunned, realizing they had underestimated her power and influence. As the meeting unfolded, it became clear that their discriminatory practices would have serious consequences. Sarah's position transformed from that of a dismissed CEO to a powerful figure demanding change. The board members' faces reflected a mix of shock and fear as they grasped the gravity of the situation. Months later, Liberty First Bank had transformed dramatically. The boardroom that once resembled an exclusive men's club now hosted meetings where voices reflected the diversity of Chicago itself. Sarah stood at the same windows where she once faced discrimination, but now she was addressing a packed auditorium for the bank's first annual Community Impact Summit. "Change," Sarah said into the microphone, her voice resonating through the space, "is never comfortable for those who benefit from the status quo. But change is essential for institutions that want to remain relevant in a world that's constantly evolving." The audience erupted in applause, but Sarah raised a hand for quiet. "I didn't return to this position to seek revenge against those who wronged me. I returned because I believe deeply that financial institutions have a responsibility to serve all members of their community with equal dignity and opportunity." Behind her, a screen displayed the bank's new statistics. A 400% increase in loans to minority-owned businesses and a 250% increase in first-time homebuyer mortgages in underserved areas. The changes they implemented weren't about political correctness. They were about sound business practices that recognized talent and opportunity wherever they existed. When you expand your definition of who deserves a chance, you expand your possibilities for success, she continued, her passion evident as the Community Impact Summit concluded. Sarah returned to her office, the same space where she once sat planning her response to institutional discrimination. Now, the walls displayed thank you letters from families who bought their first homes through Liberty First expanded lending programs, photos from small business openings funded by the bank's community development initiatives, and framed articles about the Liberty First model being adopted by financial institutions across the country. The transformation of Liberty First Bank had become a case study taught in business schools, analyzed in legal journals, and cited in corporate diversity training programs. But for Sarah, the real measure of success wasn't the headlines or the awards. It was in the individual lives changed by having access to institutions that saw potential rather than prejudice. The federal investigation that began with her termination meeting resulted in sweeping changes across the banking industry. Black, Taylor, and Parker faced personal liability for their discriminatory practices. Their removal from the industry sent shockwaves through corporate America, making it clear that discrimination at the executive level would face serious consequences. As Sarah prepared to leave her office for the evening, she looked out at Chicago's skyline that seemed full of possibility. In boardrooms throughout the city, women and people of color were taking seats at tables where they were once unwelcome. The story that began with the words, "You don't belong here," had become a narrative of transformation that extended far beyond one person or one institution. Every person reading the story had a choice to make. Will you accept systems that diminish your worth? Or will you demand institutions that recognize your value? The questions weren't rhetorical. They were a challenge that extended beyond the financial industry to every workplace, every community, every situation where power was used to exclude rather than include. Standing at the elevator that once carried her to humiliation but now represented triumph, Sarah understood that her individual victory was meaningless unless it became part of a larger movement toward justice. The courage to demand respect, the persistence to document injustice, the wisdom to build coalitions, and the vision to create lasting change. These tools were available to anyone willing to use them. The doors closed, beginning her descent from the 32nd floor, but the elevation of her cause continued to rise. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against injustice wasn't revenge. It was simply being who you are unapologetically and refusing to let anyone convince you that you belonged anywhere other than exactly where your talents could make the greatest impact.